Hello everyone. I hope everything's fine with you guys. As I've mentioned before the spring break, we will start our discussion on ratio. So for this video, you'll be learning about ratios. So what is a ratio? So a ratio is a comparison of two quantities, or you can say two numbers. And ratios can be written in three different ways. So let's take this example here. So in a class of 20 students, 12 are girls. Write the ratio of the number of girls to the number of students. So again, we're comparing the number of girls in the class to the total number of students. So if I'm gonna take note of that, there are 20 students in the class, upon which 12 of them are girls. So now we want to write the ratio of the number of girls comparing it to the total number of students. So if I'm going to write the ratio in fraction form, that would be number of girls is 12. Then if you can remember, a fraction is separated by a line, horizontal line, where the number on the top is our numerator and the number at the bottom is the denominator. So the number of girls is 12 and the number of total students is 20. So if you can see here, the question is the ratio of the number of girls to the number of total students. Okay. Another way of writing the ratio is using the symbol colon. Okay. So again, we're comparing the number of girls to the number of students. So we need to write, if you're gonna write it using a colon, so same thing, the first number should be the number of girls, so that would be 12, and then the semicolon, upon which you can read is 2. So the meaning of this is 2, the number of total students, which is 20. So again, since I'm comparing the total number of girls, so I write that one first, and the total number of students, so 20 should be written last. Okay, and the third way of writing your ratio would be using the word 2. So again, this is another way, the word 2. So again, since we are comparing the number of girls, so you're going to write that one to the number of students, so that would be 12 to the number of total students, which is 20. So again, I have written my ratios. Again, this represents just a single ratio, the ratio of the number of girls to the number of students, but written in three different ways. So again, we can write the ratio in fraction form. Second way is using a colon. And the third way is using the word 2. Okay, so again, the semicolon, if you can see there, the 2 dots there pertains to, if you're going to read it, that's 12 is to 20. Well, ratios can be reduced, and you can have an equivalent ratio of a particular ratio. So for this example, so if we want to get the equivalent ratio of the total number of girls to the number of students, you can rewrite the fraction form as, in its lowest term, if you can remember in our previous discussion on fractions, how would you reduce the fraction 12 over 20? So if you can remember, one way of doing that is finding a common number that can divide to both 12 and 20. So you can start with, let's say, 2 divided by 2, and then you divide by 2. It gives you an answer of 6 over 10. But you can still reduce that one in its simplest form, since 6 and 10 both can be divided by 2. So therefore, you can reduce it further to 3 over 5. So as a reduced form, in its simplest form, we can write our ratio as 3 over 5. Again, that is coming from here, doing the simplification of our fraction. So you started with 12 over 20. So 12 over 20 is just an equivalent fraction of 3 over 5, or 3/5. Again, if you're asking, is 6 over 10 also an equivalent ratio of 12 over 20? Well, the answer is yes. But the simplest form, if you're going to do the simplest form, it can be written as 3 over 5. So if you have seen there that the fraction is given as 3 over 5, in using a colon, we can write that one as 3 is to 5. Again, the two columns, the 2 dots there pertains to, you can read it as 3 is to 5. Or we can rewrite that one as 3 to 5. And one more thing to note is that since you're getting the ratio of the number of girls to the number of total students, the placement of these numbers should be specified. So therefore, 3/5, remember 3 over 5 is not the same thing as 5 over 3. So make sure that you read carefully the question of which ratio you are trying to get. Okay? So remember that 3 over 5 is not the same thing as 5 over 3. So the placement of the number, or the numbers that you're comparing, is relatively important also. So let's go to some practice questions here. You have, you're free to pause the video and answer it by your own. So let's start. There are 14 red marbles. So I'm gonna take that one, that 14 red marbles, and I have 20 blue marbles in a bag of marbles. So in my bag, it contains 14 red marbles and 20 blue marbles. So for question letter A, what is the ratio of red to blue marbles in simplest form? So try to take note that I'm talking about the red. So I'm comparing red to blue. So as I mentioned earlier, the placement of the numbers are relatively important. And one more thing to note is that it should be given in its simplest form. So in its simplest form. Okay. So to start with, I have 14 red marbles. So again, I'm comparing the red to the blue marbles. So I'm gonna start with the number of 14. So in fraction form, so I'm gonna write it in fraction form. So in fraction form, I have 14 red marbles and comparing it to the blue marbles. So again, the fraction, it contains the numerator and denominator. So the denominator would be the blue marbles. So the number of blue marbles would be 20. However, this would not be my final answer because specifically the question is that I have to write them in its simplest form. So how do we simplify that fraction? Again, if we go back to our fraction discussion, we'll try to find some numbers that we can divide to both 14 and 20. So both are even numbers. So this is one way of thinking of simplifying fractions. So if it is an even number, this is always the case, you can always divide an even number with a number of 2. So I will try that one. So I'm going to divide both the numerator and the denominator by 2. So if I'm going to do that, 14 divided by 2 is 7. And then my denominator will become 10. So I'm going to check if this is my simplest form. 7 over 10. Well, do you think you can divide 10 by 7? Because, well, 7 is a prime number. That means that the factors of 7 is just 1 and the number itself. So therefore, this would be the simplest form. So this is the fraction form of the ratio. Or you can also write them as, so this is one of your answer, or you can write it in its semicolon form or in a colon form. That would be 7 is to 10 or the third form using the word 2. So you start with the first number 7 is to you use the word 2 10. So in 3 different ways you have written your ratio. So the ratio of red to blue marbles in its simplest form is 7/10 in fraction form. In colon form, or using the colon, it's 7:10. And lastly, using the word 2, it's 7:10. So for the second question, again, you can always stop the video first and then you can try. So for the second question is that, what is the ratio of blue marbles to the total marbles in its simplest form? So again, I'm gonna take note first what I have. And given that I'm talking about blue marbles, comparing the blue marbles to, this time, the total number of marbles in its simplest form. Okay? Well, in this particular case, we're given the blue marbles, and there are 20 blue marbles, right? So that is given in the question. However, it is not directly given the total number of marbles. But how would you get the total number of marbles? So is it not that the total number of marbles will just be the sum of the red and the blue marbles? So the total number of marbles is just 14 plus 20, which will give you an answer of 34. So now I have the blue, so the number of blue marbles, and the total number of marbles. So again, I can write them. Well, if you will be asked for the simplest form, it's much easier to start your solution with the ratio in its fraction form. So again, I'm gonna start with the fraction form of the ratio. So fraction form. So the fraction form, again, I'm comparing the blue to the total number of marbles. So the first item should be the one that is written on the numerator. So I have there 20 blue marbles. Again, that's the blue marbles that I have. And then comparing it to the total marbles, it is 34. So you have 20/34. So this is the fraction form, but not in its simplest form. So again, I'm just gonna take note of that. This particular answer is the fraction form, but not in its simplest form. So how do we simplify our fraction? Again, it's just much easier for us to simplify if it is in fraction form. We've done that one in the past. So again, we can always start with both are even numbers. So therefore, I can divide both by 2. So you have 20 divided by 2. That would give you 10. Then all over 34 divided by 2 is 17. Well, try to check. Can you simplify that fraction further? Well, 10 is divisible by 2. However, 17 is not. 10 is divisible by 5, but 17 is not. So therefore, that would be my final answer. So this is now the fraction in its simplest form. So simplest form. And again, you can write it in two other ways. So you can also write it as 10 is to, so the colon, again, you can read it as is to 17. So that's another way. Or 10 to 17. And there you go. So if you want to review in the video, you can do that. And by the way, I'll be posting something in the Google Classroom for some things for you to work on and some questions from the textbook of yours. Okay, so see you now.